Erica is passionate about building resilient networks. She brings that energy, and you will see she has a lot, to portfolio success at Ansinus, a venture capital firm, where she applies network science principles to drive portfolio company growth. To the question, what would you like to be known for? Erica told me, a lifelong student of networks. If relationships are the single most important thing to living a long, healthy, and happy life, understanding networks will help improve those outcomes for more people. That is what she wants to do. Welcome, Erica, and thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you. That's very kind. It's great to meet all of you.
Thank you. Right, so we all know how important it is to build a network, either to develop our businesses or to find jobs. But for some of us, networking is already a challenge. Now that we are in a virtual world, it seems even more challenging, actually, to build new relationships. And we are told that even if we're allowed the face-to-face, we should not shake hands and we have to keep a distance. Tell us, what makes networking harder in the current state of the world?
Well, I guess we can reiterate the things that are challenging about networking. Well, we don't want to use the word networking as a verb here. We want to use it as a noun, which we'll get into it a little bit later. But I think that while there are a number of challenges, there are also opportunities. So the challenges, as you described, is certainly around building trust. How do you build that rapport with another individual when you can't shake hands, when you can't hug, when you can't meet in person, and get as many of those nonverbal cues that show up in the context of conversations? But the other thing that is a little bit challenging in this context is the serendipity, right? Those random encounters on public transport or in a coffee shop or at the water cooler of your organization. And so those are the types of things that we really need to replace in these types of situations, because we're not going to run into somebody in our kitchen at home or in our, on our way to the bathroom in the way we might have historically. And the other thing that is often challenging is diversity, right? So we are, by human nature, we are attracted to people that are like us. And so that type of homophily is what it's described as in sociology and in network science, means that our networks are inherently a little less diverse than we would like. And those types of serendipitous and forced conversations or situations we find ourselves in actually help to enhance that diversity. And that's often lacking when we can retreat to our very often homogenous social circles that we inhabit on a regular basis. So let's set that aside for a second and think about some things that are great about the situation we're in right now, because I am inherently an optimistic person. Location has completely been democratized, right? It doesn't matter where in the world you are, it doesn't matter what time zone you're in, within reason, unless you want to get up in the middle of the night, you can get access to and engage with people all over the world. And that's really unique. And think about the last time you had a birthday party where you had people from multiple time zones participating, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's like, I think that we have overemphasized the people who are physically intimate. And this gives us an opportunity to rethink that a little bit. And I think that's actually quite powerful. The other thing that I think, let's say, accessibility in general is on the rise. I think one of probably the major exceptions to that is if you're a primary caregiver, you have young children, or you happen to be sick yourself, right? So for sure, people who are have specific, our experience is quite heterogeneous, but I would say that accessibility of most people is higher now because they are not traveling constantly. They are not in all those in-between spaces, right? Either commuting or on a plane or on their way to a conference or an event or a business meeting. And so I think you probably have the experience that you're able to see many more people.
Great. So I'm just happy to hear that we have opportunities actually in this virtual world, at least. So if I want to jump into the heart of the matter, and if I ask you, if I think of my own network, right, what would I consider to be a strong tie, and what would be a weak tie? But most importantly, what is this paradox that everyone talks about, which is the strengths of weak ties, and how can I actually use it?
Yeah, so this is a concept by Mark Granovetter, and this was actually developed many, many years ago. And there's a lot of foundational, I would say he's probably one of the most cited papers, this particular paper, in all of the social sciences. So it's quite an interesting piece of work. And everybody's presumption at the time was that, that your strong ties were the most important and that weak ties were basically irrelevant. And what he showed was, and thank you very much. What he showed was that you have this tight-knit group of people. So as you can see on both the left and the right-hand side here, you have a tight-knit group of people that all know each other and therefore have access to basically the same information. And so what he found is if somebody was looking for a new job or a new business opportunity or new information, they had to reach outside of their local network of what is called strong ties in order to access that new and different information. And so we often refer to a strong tie as somebody that, you know, a family member, a colleague that we work very closely with, our partners, our close friends. Those are the types of people we often describe as strong ties. And weak ties are often described as acquaintances, people that are part of the same association that we see in, you know, in an organizational context, on a Zoom call, whatever, who we wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable reaching out to. And those are really important because those are tend to access more diversity, tend to allow you to access new information, opportunities, etc.
Brilliant. Okay. So, and who actually, from your experience and your studies, who's the most useful, or can we say, I don't know, powerful position in a given network?
Well, you know, the thing with networks is there are trade-offs to every situation, right? So if we look just at this diagram before we switch to the next one, B in this case is in actually quite a powerful, resilient position within their network. They have a lot of connections, there's a lot of interconnectedness, so they might feel very safe and supported in that network. Yet still, they're not A, and they do not have access to new information that A has access to. And so each of these positions in a network have a trade-off. There's another very famous person in the field of network science and sociology, and he created a concept called Burt's structural holes. And the idea behind that was people who sit at the intersection of different organizations or communities or geographies or departments in an organization play a really pivotal role. And the reason for that is they have access, they basically end up acting like a switchboard, where they have access to different pieces of information from different parts of the network, and they're able to bring that information together and share that information across these different, more interconnected groups. And so a lot of people think about, you know, A in this case, who's sitting at the intersection of these three different groups as being particularly powerful in a network context. But that position can also be really fragile, because if the relationship between any of these groups is not very, is tenuous, right? Because that person, I think many of us are probably familiar with the situation where we're selling into an organization and the person we've been selling to suddenly leaves that organization. If we only had one contact, now our relationship with that organization has completely disappeared, right? And so that's part of why you need to build a bit of resiliency, but you still sit at a pretty powerful intersection between these various worlds. And this is quite a popular thing that, you know, MBA students, when they learn about this, they're like, I want to be the broker. I want to sit in position A, right? Which it has a lot of power and can be very multifaceted. You could think about it. So for me, as an example, I grew up in New York. I lived in Hong Kong for many years, and now I live in London. So those are three worlds that I'm able to bridge that have nothing to do with my competencies, with my pedigree, with my, you know, what types of organizations I've worked in. So it's helpful to think about in what ways do you play that broker role in your lives?
Right. Okay. So I'm just conscious of time. I'm going to jump straight actually to the last question. You know, in one of your articles, you talk about the importance of cultivating one's own network, and you summarize that in a quadrant. Can you please tell us how can we use it proactively to develop actually our own networks?
Sure. So I think again, going back to what I mentioned earlier about this using networking as a verb and how that holds us back. I think that oftentimes I have one friend who told me when they first moved to London, people would say, I'm going to a networking event, and they would put networking in quotes because it felt a little bit dirty and they wanted to distance themselves from this idea. And I think that a lot of people in their heads as a result of this believe that this is a linear progression from organic. So it randomly happens. I have no control over it. I don't engage with it, all the way to it being calculating. So if you have a particular goal or outcome in mind, suddenly you're looking to extract value rather than cultivate. And I think it's important for us to realize that there's actually two dimensions here, that there is effort and altruism. And when doing that, you start to realize that there is a quadrant that we can all inhabit where we both are putting effort into cultivating our networks, but also we have all the people, us, as well as the others we interact with in mind in that context. And I think there are a number of things related to limiting beliefs and embedded assumptions that we have about ourselves that impact the way we engage in this way that I think are really critical, that are around what does it mean to be in or out of touch with somebody or lose touch, right? And who are we willing to engage with in our network in the context of strength and weak, strong and weak ties. And also, yeah, what is it when we're thinking about doing this from a place of positive or good intention? How do we exude that or get that across to people? And are we deserving of that, right? And does that seem like a good mutual exchange? So I think that it's helpful to reflect on some of the things we bring to this conversation and how it impacts the way we engage with our network.
Brilliant. Thank you.